Imagine losing your car keys. Frustrating, right? Now imagine losing a 300-foot-long armored train loaded with enough gold to make Scrooge McDuck look like he's on welfare. That is exactly what the Nazis managed to do in the spring of 1945. Most history books, and George Clooney movies, will tell you that the Allies recovered all the stolen loot. They found the art, they found the cash, they saved the day, and everyone went home happy. That is a massive lie, because somewhere in Poland, under a sleepy little mining town, there is a ghost train sitting on a forgotten track. It is reportedly packed with 300 tons of bullion, jewelry, and possibly the kind of experimental weapons that would make a Bond villain blush. It didn't just drive away. It effectively drove into the earth and pulled the hole in after it. And if you think this is just some folklore ghost story, wait until you hear about the government officials who are still actively hunting for it with ground-penetrating radar. To understand how you lose an entire train, you have to go back to the final days of World War II. It's early 1945, and the Third Reich is having a very, very bad time. The Soviet Red Army is steamrolling toward the German border with the subtlety of a monster truck rally, and the Nazi elite in Breslau, now Wrocław, Poland, are sweating through their Hugo Boss uniforms. They realize the party is over, and the landlord is coming to collect the deposit. And by landlord, I mean a million angry Soviet soldiers, and by deposit, I mean their heads. So, the local Nazi leadership decides to execute the ultimate dine and dash. This basically involves stripping the city's banks and museums of every single shiny object they could find. We're talking gold bars, jewelry, industrial platinum, and priceless art. They packed this king's ransom into an armored train that looked like it was designed by Mad Max. This wasn't a standard cargo hauler, it was a rolling fortress built to survive an airstrike. The plan was simple: get the loot to central Germany before the Russians turned Breslau into a parking lot. But here is where the master race made a rookie mistake. They trusted a route that went straight into the mountains towards a secret project that was supposedly unfinished. The train rolls out of Breslau, heading west toward the town of Waldenburg, modern-day Wałbrzych. Now, usually, trains go from point A to point B, but this train was heading for point WTF. It was navigating toward the Owl Mountains, home to Project Riese, German for giant. If you haven't heard of Project Riese, imagine if a Bond villain had unlimited funding and a meth addiction. The Nazis forced thousands of prisoners to carve out a massive subterranean city deep inside the mountains. We're talking miles of reinforced concrete tunnels, cavernous halls, and bunkers big enough to hide an entire army division. To this day, nobody actually knows what the hell it was for. A secret weapon factory? Hitler's backup man cave? A storage unit for the Ark of the Covenant? The train entered this tangled mess of tracks near the 65th kilometer marker, and then performed a magic trick. Poof. It didn't arrive at the next station. It didn't turn around. It just vanished off the face of the earth. The prevailing theory is that it pulled into a secret spur tunnel. The crew blew the entrance shut with enough explosives to reshape the mountain, and then they shot the witnesses. But if you think hiding a 300-foot steel train is crazy, wait until you hear who came looking for it first. When the Red Army finally rolled into town, they weren't exactly looking to liberate the local architecture. They were on the world's most aggressive scavenger hunt. The Soviets had special trophy brigades whose sole job was to steal back the stuff the Germans stole, plus interest. They found Project Riese. They found the tunnels. They found the concrete. But they couldn't find the train, and it wasn't for lack of trying. Interrogating local Germans usually involved less asking nicely and more pointing a T-34 tank at your living room. But the few people who actually knew the train's location had either fled west or were already pushing up daisies. For decades, the story went dormant. Under the Iron Curtain, going out into the woods with a metal detector wasn't a hobby. It was a great way to get arrested for espionage and sent to a gulag. The legend of the Gold Train became the local Bigfoot, something everyone's uncle swore he saw after 6 beers but nobody had any proof of. Until 2 guys in 2015 decided to break the internet. Fast forward to August 2015. 2 amateur treasure hunters, a Pole named Piotr Koper and a German named Andreas Wichter, walked into a government office and essentially dropped the mic. They didn't ask for a permit, they demanded a contract. They told the Polish government, "We found the train, we'll tell you where it is, but we want a legally binding guarantee of a 10% finder's fee." Now, normally, if you walk into a government building claiming you found Nazi gold based on a deathbed confession you got from an old dying man, you get escorted out by security. It sounds like the plot of a straight-to-DVD Nicolas Cage movie. But here's the kicker. The government didn't laugh. They produced ground-penetrating radar, GPR images that showed something sitting 30 feet underground. It was over 300 feet long and looked suspiciously like a line of armored carriages. The Deputy Culture Minister of Poland, Piotr Zuchowski, actually held a press conference and said he was 99% convinced the train existed. He even mentioned seeing the outline of cannons on the radar. Suddenly, the world went nuts. But there was a tiny explosive problem standing between them and the payload. The Polish government quickly realized they had a massive headache on their hands. If this train was real, the Nazis didn't just park it and walk away. The Third Reich was famous for booby-trapping their stash spots. Digging this thing up was like playing Russian roulette with a shovel. Officials warned that the tunnel could be rigged with explosives, collapsing ceilings, or, and this is the fun part, chemical weapons. There were genuine fears that cracking that seal could release a cloud of taboo nerve gas, turning the discovery of the century into a mass casualty event. It was basically the world's most dangerous piñata. That didn't stop the madness, though. Wałbrzych turned into a zoo. You had CNN crews fighting for parking spots with amateur treasure hunters who bought metal detectors on eBay the day before. The local economy boomed. Bakeries started selling Gold Train cookies, and the mayor probably considered changing his title to King of Bling. To keep people from accidentally blowing up the countryside, the Polish military had to deploy chemical, biological, and radiological units to secure the site. Finally, after months of bureaucratic arguing and safety checks, the heavy excavators rolled in. It was time to see if X marked the spot or just a really dense rock. In August 2016, the excavators finally started clawing at the earth. The world was watching via live stream. We were ready for gold bars, amber room panels, or at least a rusty Luger. They dug down 20 feet, then 30. Then they hit the specific layer where the radar anomalies were screaming there was metal. And they found absolutely nothing. Well, not nothing. They found some very nice clay and a massive layer of ice. It turns out, Mother Nature is the ultimate troll. The armored plating that showed up on the radar? That was a sharp geological edge created by an ice stratum. The cannons? Probably rocks shaped like disappointment. The scientists from AGH University of Science and Technology had predicted this months earlier, saying there was 0% chance of a train. But nobody listens to the nerds when there's gold on the line. Koper and Richter were devastated but defiant. They claimed the dig just missed the tunnel by a few meters, or that the train was buried deeper than the equipment could reach. It was the historical equivalent of swiping right on a supermodel and finding out it's a bot. But if you think a little thing like scientific proof stopped the rumors, you clearly don't know how the internet works. So, is the gold train real? Scientifically speaking, probably not at that specific spot. But historically speaking, we know the Nazis moved trains full of loot. We know Project Riese is a labyrinth of unmapped tunnels that we still haven't fully explored. And we know that billions of dollars in stolen wartime assets are still missing to this day. The search at kilometer 65 was a bust, but it wasn't the end. There are still dozens of sealed entrances in the Owl Mountains that have never been opened. Just recently, new private groups have applied for permits to scan different sections of the tracks. The allure of Nazi gold is too strong to let a little thing like reality get in the way. It remains the ultimate historical mystery box. Maybe the train is 10 miles away. Maybe the Soviets found it in 1946 and melted it all down secretly. Or maybe, just maybe, it's still sitting there in the dark, waiting for someone with better radar and a bigger shovel. Until then, Wałbrzych will keep selling the cookies, and we will keep watching the news, waiting for the headline that says, "They finally found it."